at our work session and got a few things to discuss. Got some visitors, and we'll start with our visitors. Jared, would you talk about a timeline of what you've been working on in regards to the ordinance and the requirements of the ordinance? Yes.
As you know, we just come out of the public comment section of that. We had a couple comments. One was more of wanting to know what the project was. So I had some phone conversation with a couple residents, and I sent them the application document. They seem to be fine with that. There was not a request for a public hearing. So right now, at this point, Monday, there's another meeting scheduled with some folks, the fire chief, planning and zoning, a group that's part of the next phase of the ordinance. And we will review the site application, and then Friday, we will have a recommendation. So that's kind of where we're at.
Just checking the boxes.
Yep, and we're required to do it per our ordinance.
The application has met the requirements.
Yep.
Ordinance.
At this time, I'd like to see if Rumpke would like to get up and say a few words. Just say hello. I know, Adam will.
Guys, Adam Rumpke here. We're really excited about this project. Glad you guys are considering this for the community. It's a big deal for us. Hopefully it's a good thing for your citizens, gives them some options that they currently do not have. So we're excited to do this. I guess we'll see you next week if we get the recommendation.
And it's an open meeting at 9 a.m. I would invite you all to come, and that way, in case there's any questions from anybody attending that meeting.
I'll be
and
there.
then my intent is to bring the report from the 9 a.m. meeting on Monday, and Jared to bring a recommendation next Friday to the court for consideration.
Great.
Can you, Mr. Rumpke, can you remind me again what your timeline is? I know I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire on this, but kind of a rough timeline of when you expect to be open for business.
So, John and Woody are engineers, right? So they're the ones kind of bidding this out. And go ahead.
I'm John Butler. I'm the area engineer. Woody Higginbotham, he's with us for a year now. We hired him from KDEP. This is the Department of Solid Waste. So from a compliance point of view, that's one of the things that we're adding to us. Timeline-wise, we've done our geotechnical work for the foundations for it. We have planning approval. As soon as we get through this process, I have the bid package sitting on my desk to put it out to bid for some local bidders, contractors, and also some that have built some of our structures before. We'll do an evaluation, and we'll get rolling as soon as we can. Some of the things that we got to look at is making sure we have enough water pressure, because I know fire protection is one of those ones that we have to work through, but that's usually whether or not we put a booster pump in there or not. Timeline-wise, ideally, this is that as long as we don't run into any hurdles, you're looking at the end of this year.
Okay, excellent.
And that's kind of short of any major. One of the things that everybody's contractors are running into is it's hard to get really good help, and hopefully we hit a schedule for one of the contractors that they say, yeah, we can do it this year. We've talked to a couple of them that have said, yeah, they can fit it into their schedule, but it could be extremely expensive.
I understand. Thank you.
So,
Mr. Hostetler.
So while you're up there, on the same path as Chad's talking about, so where are you at with planning and zoning? I know you've
We're done.
totally done. I thought there might be one more step.
They have one where there's conditions in there, like we have to give them the drawings ahead of, for it, and there's some landscaping things that we gotta work through once we're done, but as far as, final approval, it went through.
Yeah, I was here at that meeting. Okay, I just thought there was one more step. I guess that's what I was thinking about, that final, what it's gonna look like.
If you don't mind me to add, there's one more step through the state.
Mr. Higginbottom, would you come to the podium? Thank you, sir.
Our compliance guys remind us we still have to get a KDEP permit.
Yes, like you're saying, there is one more step. That permit for a transfer station there was held by someone else. And so we've acquired that permit, and so we need to do a transfer of ownership through the state. And so John was mentioning that there's a 2-week public comment period for that. And then they say they have 5 days to review it. So we'll see if we actually get an application or excuse me, a permit back in 5 days. So you're looking at, I would estimate about a month for the state application process.
But they can those can go at the same time as is our bidding process and moving forward with that work. And it'll take us at least a month to go through getting bids, having questions, having them look at the site, making sure everything's covered.
So you say there's public comment involved with?
With the state, correct.
Yeah. So I guess that gets noticed in the paper once you get to that point, or, okay.
Absolutely.
We just want to make sure.
That's more on the technicality of the transfer of the permit, since it was already issued.
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, because ITS, John Bishop, he had the transfer station permit for that site, and then we're literally just taking it and transferring it into our name. So,
Right. But it's all transparent, the way you're talking about, which is a good thing, so that the public knows what's going on and has an opportunity to comment if they want to, so, which is a good thing.
And Rick, we had a long public comment section also.
Right, right.
For the site.
And while we're on that, if you don't mind, Judge, and Adam, I might ask you or let you know, it's the same thing as Jared. I maybe had 2 folks contact me. I think it was 2 different individuals. And mostly both of them were concerned about odor and which is legitimate.
Yeah.
And so my response was, because of what I've learned and what your presentations is, you know, the building's closed up when you guys leave and there's no trash that stays there overnight.
Right, yeah, if you leave trash, the first thing is, if you have trash, there's potential fires. People put improper stuff in trash. We see this in our recycling, right? We're processing and we're getting batteries, catching fires and stuff like this. So the last thing we want to do is leave trash at a facility, inside of a building, potential for a fire. It needs to be empty, clean at the end of the night. So there's no fires, there's no odor. That's
Right.
how
Well,
you properly manage.
I just want to make sure, you know, because I did have, I think it was 2 different guys, and they live close to where the transfer station is going to be, so they had a legitimate concern. But that was my response to them. And
Overboom Lakes, is that kind of?
yes,
Oh,
yes. And they're just
Right,
basically
right. No, I understand.
straight across the interstate, so, and thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thanks for coming down, and I don't know if we've talked in court about our field trip to your all's facility, but that was very impressive, and what you all have to offer there. I mean, I was just kind of blown away about how many moving parts and how many, you're using air jets, magnets, all these different things. It's very, very impressive, and the professional. Just very professional as well, so
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Mudrack, do you have just a second here to share with the court your work in regards to the next phase of our compensation study and the experience aspect that we're trying to include in the big picture of items?
Sure, absolutely. I'm pleased to report that we have gone through all 240 applications and resumes of our current workforce, and for each one of those, we created basically a cover sheet and chronicled the education and experience that each individual has that's related to their job here at Scott County. So anyhow, we've completed that process. We have calculated up what those are. We've plugged those numbers into the spreadsheet that we're working from, and we've started looking to see what impact that has on us organizationally. I've had 2 department head meetings so far where I've met with those 2 department heads, kind of showing them what the impact would be, and I will be scheduling the rest of those meetings this next week. So that is kind of the plan, or at least what we've done right now. As far as the next steps, obviously, once I have those department head meetings, I'll be back with you, Judge Covington, to talk about the feedback I get and the if any adjustments to be made there. And then also, I guess we would talk to the budget committee next and let them share with them, where things stand, so.
I think that'd be appropriate, and appreciate your work and moving the needle towards completion.
Yeah, and I'm happy for that. I'm sure everybody will be happy for that. I know a lot of employees have been asking me too, what the status of that is, and so they're very eager to hear what the outcome is of that project.
We both felt it was important that Jeff sit down with department heads and constitutional officers and just kind of go through the data, and then we make decisions based on the data and share with you all, and go from there. What questions does anyone have for Jeff? No questions, and
All right.
carry on. Thank you very much. Next, I handed out a sheet of paper, low barrier emergency shelter. Some people also call it a white flag shelter. And just want to talk to you, we had mentioned this previously. This would be something that I would like the court to consider for next year, after July 1, moving into next winter. This was just basically the nuts and bolts of what we would be doing. Multiple emergency shelter activated by EMA and the director. Notify media and all organizations that work with the people experiencing homelessness in Scott County. You can try to set up a communications avenue and chain. White flag days would be determined. We try to set and look at the weather forecast 72 hours out. Emergency shelter plan provides coordinated response to shelter homeless individuals on nights when the temperature low is expected to fall at 20 degrees or below. When a low barrier shelter is open, clients may include but not limited to someone that might have mental illness, physically disabled, severe trauma or domestic violence, substance abuse addiction, and may have a criminal history or conviction. For safety reasons, children under age 18 will not be permitted to stay in the shelter. For those situations, we'd reach out to contacts with faith-based groups. When guests came in the shelter, upon admission to the shelter, guests must fill out a guest intake form, provide photo ID if available. If available, guests will be given a copy of house rules, rights and responsibilities, and storage policy. All personal belongings of guests will be placed in an amnesty box provided by the shelter. Personal belongings form filled out and signed by both guests and staff. Male and female guests will be separated in the sleeping area of the shelter at all time, no exceptions. What I would envision is building temporary wooden separator to put in at the blue metal building at the Brookings Park, and it would just go down through, and we could figure out a way to do that economically and still be able to do what we needed it to do. Bed linens will be furnished by the shelter. Guests will not be permitted to use their own linens just for hygiene and those purposes. I've talked to Jailer Broyles about the possibility of the staff that's manning the shelter at the conclusion of the next morning, bringing those to the jail, and they being laundered there and prepared for whenever the next night is. Jailer Broyles, you think it'd still be a possibility?
That absolutely is possible.
What would this be possible? I have not spoken to you about this, but the other piece is you've got to mop it and clean the bathrooms after the night. Would any jail detail be able to maybe meet that need?
Yeah, absolutely. So we could easily work into our laundering schedule to take care of those linens, to get them laundered, and we could get a detail out there that day, sometime during the day.
Sometime during the day to just do a cleanup, mop, and clean the two bathrooms.
Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
That's great. I appreciate that greatly.
Absolutely.
And then guests may be banned from the shelter for a set length of time for following restraining order, violent or threatening behavior, weapons or substance abuse violation. We'll have to just work on that at case by case. And then here's, in my opinion, we have to have staff that's paid by the county or whoever. In my mind, I would possibly approach our other partners in the community to maybe share this expense and that. But ultimately, I'm asking you all to consider this to start with, and I'll work on this as we go forward. Staff, have some training, and minimum of 2 people on duty. Of course, they'd have to stay awake during those hours of operation. Crisis prevention, verbal de-escalation, universal precautions, infectious disease prevention, emergency evacuation procedures and fire safety, first aid and CPR, all those things. And then, we'd want the staff to have some expectations about being well-groomed and dressed in a manner that's appropriate for the shelter, and such. So, of course, what I'd like to do is get your feedback and thoughts on how to proceed, and is this something that the court wants to entertain for next year? And we're setting, the budget's being put together now. We're asking department heads to put together proposals and such. So this is the time to consider this, in my mind, and I'm trying to make it as low cost as possible and provide an avenue for folks that don't have shelter to have some option. And they might choose not to, but at least they would have the option. What questions does the court have? And Mike, do you have any comments to add? Mike has done all this prep work for us, and we've talked back and forth, but I appreciate Mike's efforts.
The one comment that I wanted to make clear was the training that the judge mentioned. We have found different avenues to get that provided for free. So if we hire an individual or 2 or 3 individuals, first aid, universal precautions, CPR, everything would be provided to them at no cost to the employee as well as no cost to the county.
Mike, I'm having a hard time envisioning, if you're hiring staff, I mean, depends on the weather, so how are we gonna hire a staff member? Or is it just gonna be somebody that's already
Temporary,
on?
seasonal,
Right.
and it kind of on call.
Okay, because, it could be one day every 2 weeks, it could be
We
a whole
tr-
week every,
It could be never. I
Right.
mean, it could,
If
but I don't know how we could.
right now is there.
Yeah, I don't know how we could not have.
So I didn't know if
staff.
there was a way to use, no, I agree, you gotta have somebody.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if there's a way to already use people that we already have on staff.
Good question.
I don't know if it's fire guys that are 24 on and 48 off or
The
whatever.
problem you end up with seasonal and on call is on Saturday morning, a guy gets up at 9 o'clock, he eats cornflakes and watches cartoons till 10:30, then he goes about his day. And just about the time he's getting ready to turn in to bed at night, he gets a phone call that says, we need you to work and stay awake all night.
But we're going to put this. If the weather forecast,
72 hours.
we're going to try to put it 72 hours out in front.
Right.
Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's correct.
And if it's
Would
20,
you guarantee them their hours, I guess, after that point, if you've already?
I'll be honest with you. If we scheduled it and it ended up being 22 instead of 20, let's roll with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what?
And my hope is that some of the people that are currently volunteering for the nonprofits or the faith-based would be interested in rolling over to a paid position
Gotcha.
on these days, because they'd already have the experience. They know they like to deal with these people.
That's a good point.
Just an option to, put a little bit of cash in their pocket. I actually put it out to the volunteers with my agency, and none of those people were willing to be that free. They have the 9-to-5 jobs and, couldn't dedicate that they would be available for that 12-hour block. But over the course of the next few months while we're building this program out, we would try to find as many as we could that would be willing to work on that on-call seasonal maintenance basis.
You probably already thought of this, and I've been in the building and been in the restrooms, but is it handicap accessible?
It is handicapped accessible. There are no showers there. One of the rules is that we will not allow people to do anything but basic bathing and, go in, brush your teeth, that type of thing. We're not providing showers. We're not providing any kind of laundry service for them. You come in, you leave all your stuff in the amnesty box. 12 hours later, we give you your stuff back and you go on your merry way. By doing this, we're not being forced to do background checks on these people and, patting them down for weapons and everything. We're just, whatever you bring in, you take back out with you.
That gives me another thought. You're talking about 12 hours later. We've been pretty fortunate, I think, for the last number of winters, not to have a whole lot of these days, but sometimes when they come for days at a time where you're really not going to be able to turn anybody loose, or not going to want to if it stays down below freezing, even during the daytime.
The reason that we chose the hours we did was that other public buildings would open up after we closed. I don't want them to come in and set up camp for 4 or 5 days, but if you stay with us till 8 a.m., then Walmart's open, the library's open. There are places that you can go and warm up without.
And conversations have taken place with G-Tran about having a pickup spot like in the city parking lot or somewhere, and then having a drop off in the morning as well. And then I've had conversations with the Amen House about providing a sack, meal when it's opened. And that was, they thought something could be worked out there too. Chad, do you have a question? You look like you have one.
What do you envision as a quantitative number of this being a successful program?
Here's my reality. We have zero option right now for folks. We have for a low barrier option, and we might have zero show up. And if we do, then we do. But I just feel compelled that we should try to make efforts to help and try to be physically responsible about it. Not, I don't have that. I just don't have that answer. And it's a good question.
This is something you'll reassess. I mean, obviously we'll.
I think we do it for a season. We look at the numbers, and then we make a decision. Is it something we want to continue doing?
Yeah.
But I just, something I think is something we should consider doing.
Okay.
We should consider it, but the fact that we don't have a program probably is why we don't have much of an issue right now. And let me talk from experience here. My company provides security to several churches and several charitable organizations in Lexington. And they all started out by wanting to be good folks and good neighbors and help people out. And homeless people would show up and they'd give them a place to warm up and a bag of groceries and $20. And the next day, 40 homeless people would show up. They'd all give them a bag of groceries and a place to warm up, a hot meal and $20. And the next day, 80 would show up. And then they can't figure out why they've got a problem with so many people showing up on their doorstep. It's because that you've laid that out there. Now, what I tell these folks, it's got to be a little tough love, okay? You want to help them, but you can't allow them to take advantage of you. And because these people have done this, we have to put security guards inside churches, from 8 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning. And you find homeless people in there and they say, but I'm homeless. And we tell them, you got to be homeless somewhere else. But this is God's house. Well, I understand that, but it's not your house. Okay, and then you get into this discussion with them, why they can't stay there. Okay, why they can't turn this into a squatter's camp. These are things that we need to be looking at with our eyes wide open, because once you start down this path, okay, it's going to be like the Salvation Army down here on the corner of West Main and Newtown, okay? You see them lined up out there every night at 7 o'clock, and buddy, at 6 o'clock the next morning, they're throwing them out. And they line up there the next night at 7 o'clock, and the next morning they throw them out. And we're gonna get into a vicious cycle now. If we just say we wanna do this while it's cold, okay? Understand it's gonna be cold all winter.
And
We need to be prepared for that.
I agree
We're gonna
with
set
what
a
you're saying.
temperature, I think, right?
And, we've done considerable amount of thoughts on that, trying to come up with ways to make it as, make the experience as non-enjoyable as possible.
Well, yeah, you don't,
Hey, we're not here to make it happy. We're here to keep you
Not
from dying
Disneyland.
in the
you know,
cold.
these people, they get a hot meal in their belly and a place to sleep, and they think they've died and gone to heaven, most of them.
Bill,
and they will
this
come
is
back.
20 degrees.
Huh?
It's gotta be
20.
20 degrees for it to be open.
Okay, well, guess what? People freeze to death at 32.
I know, but this, the rules for 20.
Yeah.
Bill, it's all something to think about. It's just,
I would encourage you, maybe you and I go to Lexington and look around a little bit and see what folks down there are being
I've
faced.
been down at the courthouse square on many occasions. I've been out at Salvation Army, and I do understand the dynamics. I think my thought process is the bare minimum provided to keep somebody from freezing to death if it's 25 or below. And that's just,
Majority of these people have drug problems, and we need to be cognizant of that fact.
well, and very much aware of that.
Okay.
And would ask law enforcement to come by and check on, a drop in every hour or two.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Judge. I think it's a wonderful thing we're doing, okay? And there's a human side of me that says, yes, this is the right thing to do, but then there's also the side of me that says we have one chance to do this right the first time. And if we don't look at everything, we could get some really unpleasant surprises.
Do you want to also think of all the schools there in that area?
Yeah.
And make sure we, next morning, roll around, we
Right, yeah.
school traffic and kids everywhere.
Escort them way out of town.
Well, I think at G-Tran will pick up and drop off back in town.
Yeah.
Not be, there's nothing saying, here's the reality. If somebody decides I'm walking out at 7 and going to walk down 25, nothing I can do about it.
No, yeah.
But
And there's nothing
I don't
to say
have-
they can't be there anyway.
yeah, but we just don't have another location that would fit the needs of what we think the minimum
Temporary needs.
temporary needs.
Right.
And, the original proposal was about 55 pages. We've got almost 6 months to tweak and, make sure that we've got all of our Ts crossed and Is dotted. I just wanted to make sure that I don't have to face my conscience when somebody calls and says, it's 10 degrees outside and the food pantry's kicking these people out. What are we doing with them? Like I said to the judge when we first started this, if we had a tornado this afternoon, I know how to handle that. I know where those people are going. I know where the shelters are. From the homeless point of view,
Just to talk to that, if you have a list, emergency shelters for that case. We don't have something like this.
right.
What other questions anybody else have? If you think of something during the week, let me know. And, I think it's my job to bring information and items to you. And I certainly don't speak for the court, but I think it's my job to bring things to put on the plate for consideration. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Next thing I'd like to turn your attention to is the CASA of Lexington, Scott County Needs Assessment 2019. And this piece of documentation came from a meeting that I had with a representative from CASA of Lexington and the mayor of Georgetown, Mayor Prather, we both met with them together at their request because they're interested in Scott County becoming a partner of CASA of Lexington. And some of the data that you can see here on these two sheets talks about information from Scott County. And Rand, you might be able to speak to some of this a little bit as well. But what CASA does is a court-appointed special advocate for children. And the family court judge will appoint a advocate for an individual minor that is a victim of abuse, neglect, dependency. And you can see on this sheet 176 new dependency, abuse, neglect cases filed in Scott County Family Court last year in 2019. 176 cases. Last year in 2019, there was 277 child victims of substantiated abuse and neglect. And, what the family court judge would do is they would appoint a volunteer, an adult that has been trained to serve as an advocate for a student, or not necessarily a student, but just a child. And the program, the request essentially to us as a fiscal court is to partner with them, both in a monetary way, and then also if we could help them find an office space in Georgetown. That's the two items. The request from CASA of Lexington is for $20,000 from the fiscal court and $20,000 from the city. Had a little conversation about, if we couldn't give 20 and we gave 10 apiece, what would that look like? And I'll get more information and a narrative to share with you as we move forward. But, in my mind, this program is kind of part of the budget process on nonprofits that we deal with. And I wanted you to have this information to process and read as we go through the budget process. So that was the whole purpose of me sharing this today. And in my opinion, it's something we need to take a hard, long look at supporting and how we could move forward. It's a significant number of cases in my mind that need attention. And then our family court judge, Lisa Hart Morgan, is a big advocate of the program. So, Rand, do you have any information you know of?
Well, I can tell you a little bit. I rarely do this docket. When I do it, I fill in for somebody that's on vacation, usually Ben Lewis. But I can tell you, the docket is growing every single year. I guess 176 cases it says there. That doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure there'll be more this year. Having filled in, I'd say 80% of the cases, maybe more, involve parents who are on drugs. So you've got children at risk, at great risk. So yeah, to have somebody to try to coordinate resources and help people walk through this process, in my mind, would be a great asset.
So, would you all like me to schedule a representative from CASA to come and share any information or answer questions at a court meeting here in the future?
I think it would be good to have in a workshop. They did a presentation at the judges' conference last month or two ago. And
Try to get it at the next workshop.
Yeah, they did a great presentation.
Yeah. I will do that. All right. Now, the other piece of documentation that I have there in front of you represents work from the Capital Projects Committee that will come to you as a formal recommendation. This is what we've been working on, and we started this process about 10 months ago. Chad, Rick, and Kelly have served on this, along with Alonzo Allen, Joe Arnold, Yukari Figgs, and Kelly Kearney have partnered with us, and we have met probably 10, 12 times, Chad,
Bunch.
Rick, and we have listened to presentations from our constitutional officers, our department heads, Parks and Rec, Friends of the Park, and just tried to gather data and then to turn that data in conversations into a recommendation for a capital projects plan that would meet the needs in a physically responsible way. And on the first page, you can see, after meeting and talking with JR, looking at needs going forward for equipment. If you don't have equipment, you can't operate very well, and you can't have the services that we need. And looking there, over the next 5 years, the recommendation would be to replace a dump truck a year at $125,000. 2 salt spreaders a year, the aluminum bodied ones. Next year, a new purchase for a brush truck, and that brush truck would increase efficiency on picking up brush and replace man hours with truck hours. And then I put intentionally in this line the annual road paving, that I feel like we should continue a commitment of at least $1 million. The budget really says 1.25 from last year, but that 250,000 is for materials that's used. And JR, would you like to add anything to any of this that I've just mentioned?
That's for repairs that we do at Sam Brass.
Yes.
Coal mix, road salt, stuff like that.
Yeah. In 22, replace a backhoe. In 23, a Bobcat and a pickup truck. I'm sorry, in 22 we also had a pickup truck. And then in 23, a roadside mowing tractor. And then 24, one of the bigger items you can see there would be the large front end loader. And then moving on there into 25, just a dump truck, salt spreaders, and another pickup truck. Moving to the next page, Parks and Rec came a couple times and we talked, and then of course we had that community forum, and we had a big turnout of folks that were very interested and wanted to advocate for help at Lyle Road Soccer Complex. And we have over 750 young people that play soccer out there. There's several fields. There are no bathrooms, no storage, no concessions areas out there at all. And in the conversation with Parks and Rec, the thought process came up, could we kill 2 birds with 1 stone if we married helping the Lyle Road Soccer Complex and also potentially using that expenditure to count as a match for a TAP grant to try to extend the Legacy Trail from the Fayette County line to Lemons Mill Elementary there. So it was, evident from the community forum and the folks that turned out that advocated for this, and the committee felt that this should be a priority for 21 to earmark, approximately, and I'm throwing down 400,000. We need to probably sharpen our pencil and look at that. And I've talked to JR about costs on parking lot, but this would go towards concession building and bathrooms building, and then a parking lot. And the plan is to also, for this spring, apply for land and water grant monies that, and use this as match on that as well for land and water to help for the parking lot. The land and water can't build a building, but it can build a parking lot. Doesn't make sense, but it is. So that's the recommendation, and we'd like to be able to follow this up with a TAP grant in the future. There's no funds for TAP this year, but possibly next year to extend the legacy trail. Emergency management, the committee felt like making this recommendation and then finding out, Mike had mentioned about moving forward with a possible grant application for a storm shelter. But in FY21, we'd purchased 2 mobile message boards, and we'd possibly offset with one of those, possibly if Wedco might be interested in purchasing one, then we could share one. We'd just purchase one, so we're going to investigate that. But also a purchase of a F-350 pickup truck was recommended by the committee, and then we'll see how the grant goes, and then we come back and amend any recommendations from there. Going to the next page.
Can we back up a minute?
Yes, sir.
I see down here we have storage building, and that's been an ongoing issue for as long as I can remember. Mobile command post, that number, I'm not sure where it came from, because I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago before the previous manager retired. We talked about trading in the RV that had been donated to us and hopefully getting $5,000 or $6,000 out of it, and just buying a pull behind, a camper. Okay.
And I was going to come back because you sent that email to me, and I was going to mention your email as well, but we can do it now. Mike, would you like to share where the 150 came from?
The number that I came up with was a gooseneck featherlight trailer that is actually a command post vehicle. Once we
pull behind fifth wheel.
Pull behind. That's where the pickup truck came into play.
Yeah.
So we would be able to use the truck on a daily basis and then bring the trailer for whenever we needed the command post. Doing it as a tag-along camper, it becomes unwieldy is the best. You end up having to strip out something that wasn't meant to do what it's doing. The wiring is a nightmare trying to get into all of those things. So my recommendation was to get a command vehicle from day one that's set up to do what it's supposed to do, and over time, if we have to upgrade something, it's basically plug and play. We got the new radio system, so all of that equipment is already going to be ready to go. We're just talking about having something that may have a mast we can put a camera on, different choices that we can upfit to. But once we have the trailer, it lasts forever. We're not trying to maintain an engine transmission.
I can understand that, but for $150,000, I'll take you down here and we'll buy you a 30 or 40-foot motorhome. I mean,
and
$150,000 is pretty cost prohibitive for something that may be used once a year, twice a year.
Well, that's the committee wasn't making that as part of the
I
recommendation.
understand that. Okay.
But what you're saying is, would there be a less expensive alternative that would meet a need?
And at this point in time, this is several years ago. I say several years ago, probably 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Just on a drive-by, I stopped in a couple of these RV places, and I said, look, you guys have got a 26-footer sitting over there. What if I wanted that gutted, or what if I wanted to order that from the factory with no beds and no shower, or just a different setup? And they said, we can do anything you want. Okay. they're stamping these things out like cookie cutters because that's what everybody's buying. But if you go in there and you plop down cash and you say, look, I want a 26-footer or a 22-footer, and I want it to have this in there, and I want it to have a 3.5 kW generator and an inverter and all the other nice things and a refrigerator, and I want it to be air conditioned, and they'll make you whatever you want. And it may not cost, what you would want if you got one that had twin beds and a, push out and a roll away and everything else on it. That's what we were looking at. Again, it's probably been 3.5.
Would you like Mike to do some additional research on like what you're saying?
I just think that.
What'd you say, Dwayne?
Just some alternatives.
Yeah.
If there's a lower cost alternative that allows us to get something sooner than later, okay, I'd be all well for doing that.
And I'm right there with you.
Yeah, you hang 150,000 out there and it's gonna sit there for a long time.
Oh, I understand that, but we got to this number because I was trying to get off of the $400,000 number that we were talking 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Woo!
Yeah.
If we bought the mobile
was when they had
command
wings
post
and
that
pontoons on it.
Lexington has, the self-contained unit with radios in the conference room and the whole 9 yards, it's between $400,000 and $500,000. So we
But
were.
if we bought a shell and, minimum it was AC and heated, and then over time finished out the interior with what you wanted, would that work?
I'm definitely open to suggestions, and I will find whatever it takes to.
Right now, if you go into our mobile command post and you're in there more than 45 minutes with the generator running, you need to step outside and be slapping yourself in the face because we're getting carbon monoxide in there.
That's exactly right. And the suspension has been on the snubbers for at least 11 years. Because we got way more equipment than the suspension was ever supposed to
And I got to tell you, as far as an RV goes, we could surplus that thing, and I'm sure we'd get $5,000 or $6,000 for it.
I will do all the research and try to come up with alternatives. And
Okay,
bring
and
that
report back. All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's part of the discussion. That's why we're doing this. EMS, 3 items that the committee wanted to recommend for FY21. Priority was a generator for Stamping Ground for the facility at Stamping Ground, estimated at $80,000. Now, in conversations, the possibility of applying for a grant has been discussed. Mike, did you brought that up to me as well, didn't you?
It's the same grant we're
Yes.
but we did get some generators. That was one of the things that was on our list down the road. We did get 2 generators for free. That was kind of a state deal they sent down. So that's kind of one. They're out there. You just gotta.
Yeah. So that's been, but felt like it was a priority just for safety purposes that if we had an emergency, that the EMS station in Stamping Ground could serve as a facility to meet the needs of that community.
How big of a
right now, we don't have a generator.
How big of a generator are we looking at for $80,000? That's a monster.
We've had trouble with our stations. They put a small generator in our newest station in Sadeville, and it would run a refrigerator.
They don't do very much.
I mean,
24/7.
We had to go in and change some things around because it had electric radiant heat in the bay.
Oh, yeah.
Brandon Remley's on vacation, but he's the one who provided that dollar figure.
I'm about to say, if you've got electric radiant heat, yeah, that's why you need an $80,000 generator.
Well, then we found a cheaper alternative by going in and putting in 1 loop propane heater, which will still hit the bay if we have to heat it.
Yeah.
And we could go down and drop the size of the generator and not have to worry about that.
We have a facility in Lexington that's got a 25 kW Generac backup, okay? And when the power goes off, this thing automatically kicks on. It comes on 30 minutes a month and exercises itself, okay? But we're gas heat, okay? So that makes a difference. And it'll run the air conditioning.
Yeah,
I want to say that was like maybe 20,000. But, if you're talking about you've got electric baseboard heat in that place, oh, yeah.
Well, and I don't know.
I don't know what I need to, if we move forward,
Yeah.
we're gonna look at options.
Okay.
Might make Mr. Ellison go help me.
Yeah, because I'm about to say, you know,
Um,
if you turn that
time.
baseboard heat on there, they're shoveling more coal down the Dix River Dam.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that was considered in that, it's more than just the actual generator. You've
Yeah.
got to get that into the building,
Yeah.
which there's some costs there,
Tougher too.
all of that. But also, Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, I was at that meeting, I was thinking the public was, they ranked that
They ranked
pretty
that
high
very
as well.
highly. And this is, it's from that form, we ranked it out and tried to look at what was, that data from that.
The only thing I would say at Stamping Ground is, if it is a true emergency, Stamping Ground Elementary has a generator that's, it's going to be fired up. And
Yeah.
we'll be taking people too, so.
Okay. And that's another piece of information to consider. Looking at ambulance for 22, the committee felt like that was a priority. And then beginning in 23, we'd like to try to recommend, and first and foremost, we'd have to coordinate with the city, but an EMS station east of I-75 in the Lexus Way area, if we could split this up into 2 fiscal years and time it up right, where you had $1.5 million each year for a total of 3, and then the city put in 3. That was a ballpark estimate for getting that project done, and that ranked out high, and that's why it's on that recommendation. But Brandon Rimley can give you exact stats of why it's needed in that area and how it would increase efficiency and decrease call times throughout the whole community by doing that. Moving down to fire department. Yes, sir.
We've only got one ambulance over 5 years. That's less than the replacement rate we've been doing. We're talking about adding a station. It's
Well,
not gonna work.
that is what from here on out, what he says is we'd be able to rip the box off the back and just replace the chassis.
But there's nothing in here for that. That's
And this is just a recommendation for us to talk about, but that we can talk and look more closely at that. Fire department, self-contained breathing apparatus was the number 1 priority and rated out really highly. It's just, there's no question about that recommendation. And I do think we estimated high, and Mike, you felt like it might be closer to 700, but we put 750 down.
Not knowing what we might do
Yeah,
there.
but you've applied for grants as well, and before we did any type of order, we'd see how the grants came through. FY22, the next list, and Mike, they did an excellent job of presenting and letting us look at data on the different pieces of apparatus in the fleet. And the next one that would be recommended would be Engine 6 at Sadieville. It's $650,000. Mike, how old is that engine again?
That one is 12 years old.
Okay. But gets a lot of runs off the interstate, right, is what you had talked about?
Well, that's the one thing we've been waiting on 6 weeks to get the motor put in.
Right. And we'd make the other one a backup, right? The current one. And then FY23, we put out, the ladder truck that's 20-plus years old by then.
It's a 90.
Yeah.
It's 22.
Yeah. And, you mentioned about the actual composition of the actual ladder being the metal that it is, where a newer one would be aluminum and.
Yeah, we have to have it tested. We have it tested every year. Obviously, if there's any problems, any roads or anything, we would probably.
Okay.
Judge, can I ask Mike a quick question? you were talking about specifically about Engine 6 and a lot of I-75 calls. In the event that there is a wreck on I-75, you charge the insurance company a run for a fire? Okay. All right, thank you.
Moving on down to Sheriff's Department, the committee can say this, that the current office building does not meet the needs of the agency moving forward into the future. And looking at that as a recommendation, you have a couple options. You know, we have been working very diligently, and I've been to Frankfurt several times. I've met with part of our House of Representatives, Philip Pratt, Savannah Maddox, and we've worked really hard and went to AOC, Administrative Office of the Courts, met with Jason Nemus, one of the representatives that's on the Budget Committee for AOC, and just talking about our caseload and how our current Justice Center does not meet the needs of our community now, and much less as we move forward. So our hope, and we're very hopeful and optimistic that Justice Center, a new one, is in the House budget, that leaves the House budget in the next day or two and goes to the Senate. Sheriff Hampton went with me, Judge Maddox, Kelly Corman, David Livingston. Who else went?
I did.
Dwayne went. We went and met specifically to ask for the support of Senator Thayer. If it left the House and came to the Senate, would he support it? He has pledged his support and will do what he can to make sure it stays in there on the Senate side. So if that is funded in this budget, then what that does is it gives us an option for potential to look at the cost of the current judicial center. What would it cost to fix it to meet the needs of the Sheriff's Department? That would be consideration number one. Would it be economically feasible to put money into that and see if it would meet the needs of the Sheriff's Office? How much would it be? The other option is to build a new Sheriff's Office across from Great Crossing High School and the current road department. What are some pluses about that? We already own it. Number two, the location. Putting a law enforcement agency 100 yards from your biggest school in your county, you cannot put a dollar figure on that, in my mind. So the recommendation out of this is that the current one does not meet the needs, and we need to wait and see if the Judicial Center is funded. If it is, then what would be a cost to retrofit and fix the current Judicial Center to see if it would meet the needs of the Sheriff's Department, or if compare that to the cost of building a new Sheriff's Office. What questions do you all have about that?
Well, just to comment, we also discussed if it didn't work out with the Judicial Center retrofit, for lack of a better term. There are other departments or agencies that need space. The county clerk, the circuit court clerk. We even discussed the jail as far as expansion. We were just trying to knock on every potential in our, and I don't know if Chad will add to this or what, but so there's a lot of discussion. I mean, that you've already expressed it, but what we did was, when we found out what the AOC and where we're ranked, until we actually know that, when we know definitely, yes, that's coming, and when it's coming, or no, it's not, then we'll probably have to regroup. But that's kind of the linchpin, and there was a lot of discussion in several of our meetings, because we know the Sheriff's Department is in need. I mean, they're out of space. I still remember the first time I went down there, probably in my first year. Sheriff invited us all down, and I appreciated that. But I mean, they were stacked on top of one another then, so.
That's before we moved the detectives over to the library.
Sheriff Hampton, would you like to share your thoughts about any of this?
And while the sheriff's coming up, the feasibility study that's also been budgeted for or potentially.
Recommended.
Yeah, it's going to tie in a little bit with how we move forward with the sheriff's office, as well as hinging upon
jail and the ALCs.
The ALC and the Justice Center. So they're all kind of tied together.
Sheriff Hampton and I have looked at a couple floor plans, one of the Nicholasville Police Department and then the Versailles Police Department. And, you know, common things that Sheriff Hampton has shared with me as needs of training, you know, a community room that could also double as, you know, to put at least 50 people in for training purposes, meetings, secure storage, a dry room, what else?
Sally Port.
A Sally Port. Those have been parts of the conversation. You know, and I even talked with Sheriff Hampton about, you know, could you just have law enforcement at a new facility and leave your tax collection in the current facility? And that doesn't work, and I respect what Sheriff Hampton's saying, because that's a huge part of his job, and he needs to be in the same building as that and oversee that. It's just too big a thing. So in those conversations about, you know, if you're going to build another building, one of the pluses could be is making a drive-through lane for not only tax collection payments, but also, and I've spoken with county clerk staff about another lane. If you had two lanes, could we put two deputy county clerks out there in a satellite office where people could drive out there and not have to get out of their car and renew their tags in the same place?
Well, the other thing with that too is we do all the vehicle inspections, and they leave straight from our office and come up here to get their tags for that particular vehicle. If we were able to put a couple of clerks out there, they could, first off, we could inspect the vehicle on site, and they could go ahead and get their tags
You
there.
walk in and get their tags done.
And I wouldn't be opposed to sharing that space as long as we made it adequate enough for them.
We'd have to design it, but
I think it would be a great gesture for our citizens to give them that opportunity.
What else would you like to share? You know,
Well,
about
the
the
thing
location is the key in that.
I love the location. Like you said, location, location, location. That's with anything. Couldn't be a better spot. Not only the biggest high school, not only the biggest school, but there's 3 schools there, Elkhorn and
Western Elementary, and then you jump on, and you can be back at Long Lick and Cardinal Drive.
With the bypass, you know, we have great accessibility to anywhere in the county. The thing about the Justice Building, and I appreciate the thought, and, you know, I'll sit back and wait and see how it goes. But if this were to pass through the Senate for the new judicial building, which I hope it does, we need it. Our courtrooms are packed, and you know our dockets ran. So, but even if that went through, but by the time we did a study, and then you're talking about land acquisition for a new judicial building, you're talking about probably several to many years.
I couldn't see it less than 24 to 36 months.
Yeah, and we're busting at the seams, and
that would have to be a factor in the decision on which way we went. But I just didn't feel like we'd be good stewards without at least looking at it as an option. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, once the budget's done through the state, I think that's going to give us some, a vision. That the only piece left will be the feasibility study of the existing Justice Center before we have to make a decision on moving forward.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you, Judge, that if we pass this in your budget, that feasibility study start in July or August as soon as possible to look at.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Next was the detention center. You know, we've got an 86-bed facility. Jailer Broyles has shared that we've had 150, 140. I mean, he's going with a thumbs up. So you know, that there's no question, and with our projected growth, that we have to look at this. However, the committee wanted to see how they would like to recommend that we look at contracting with a drug treatment / diversion program that could possibly add what's known as an IOP, an intense outpatient program. They'd get the people that would be assigned there from the court system, in lieu of going to jail, would be assigned to this program. They would get individual counseling, group counseling, essential skill training. They get connected with jobs. Rick and I have met with Isaiah House, and then Rand and our Commonwealth attorney, Sharon Muse, met with the Shepherd's House the other day, trying to gather as much data as we can. But in my mind, the next step on this is that we have the Shepherd's House and the Isaiah House come to court and share with you all a presentation about what they do, so that the whole court can have that for consideration. It would be interesting to me to see how that type of program could impact our jail numbers. But in a long term, with our growth and such, we are going to have to make plans for an alternate site in the future. And that's why the committee also felt like we should go on and commission a feasibility study in 21 in July, and have it done so we know what's recommended about, you know, the size, location, those type of recommendations. And my 2 cents on that, from me doing research, the location would have to be out of town. It would have to have a secure perimeter, and it would have to have enough acreage that we would build at the recommendation, but have room to expand in the future on that exact same site. So we're not in the same place that we are today. That's my 2 cents on that. Jailer Broyles, would you like to share anything?
No, I think you hit it all.
Okay. All right. No, I appreciate it. Anybody else on the court want to share anything about that aspect? All right, I'll move to Great Crossing Park Phase 1.5. I called it 1.5 instead of 2.0 because at this point the committee didn't feel like going forward with making plans for another clover leaf of fields were appropriate right now. Then that might change in a couple years. We'll come back and revisit this. But what the committee did feel like is we have a beautiful park. I mean, it is beautiful. But we need some playground equipment, and we need a pavilion. And I don't know if we can do both of them at one time, but, you know, I'd like to get costs on how much it would cost to have a 50 by 50 covered just frame for shade, and then the rest of the balance be used on playground
Is that
equipment.
approximately the same size as the one we have at the other parks and down at Great Crossing? Or?
Yeah, I think it's about the same. I'm not sure. I just threw that number out.
I've got to tell you, I think there's probably enough folks out there that would use them. We could build 2 or 3 of them at Great Crossings, and folks would be into them pretty quick.
No, I agree. But I just felt like playground, you know, from the conversations and feedback, playground equipment, and it's expensive. I mean, Dwayne, you know better than I do.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So that's, and then in the future, you know, 22, you know, but this, in my mind, if we put a sheriff's office out there, then that might impact where we put a walking trail. We need to finish the circle of a walking trail in my mind as well. Moving on so we can get out of here today. The last one that I have on there is county clerk. It's pretty cut and dry. I don't think we have any options. Deputy clerk Kenna Portwood shared today that their office has already applied for grant monies that was mentioned. They've already done that, but if we didn't get any grant dollars, the committee thought let's look at spending $250,000 in 21 and $250,000 in 22 and that would have machines taken care of. Now, I'd like to know when we sell our machines, what we're gonna potentially get. And I asked that question, I haven't gotten it, but I'll try to get it. I don't have anything else. This was for you to chew on and talk and look at. Jailer Broyles has an annual report that he's gonna speak to. But let me say this before we move on. Rick, Kelly, Chad, and the rest of our committee, I really greatly appreciate the time and effort that went into the thought and discussions into this to present to the court. And of course, it's the court's decision, how to go forward with it. But I really think there's a lot of thought into it, and I think it really is in a physically responsible manner. It's not just out there just throwing funds around where we have wants. It's about needs. Jailer Broyles?
Hey, Judge, but before,
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Jailer Broyles. I just want to make a couple comments about that committee in particular, and then you and how you've led it. Personally, I really appreciate the fact that you dig and you just grab up all the information you can and you present it to us. Like here, you did it in that committee, and then the folks on that committee who are just citizens were willing to give a lot of time up. And quite frankly, Alonzo did a lot of work. I know with you.
No, 100%.
Yeah, and so just for the record, it's very much appreciated. It really helped us on the committee, which I think will help us as a court as we make our decisions going forward. And I just really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate those comments. And my intent going forward was for the court to be able to consider this and look at it and have the data. But my intent is to have the whole committee come to a meeting and express our appreciation to the committee and there could be some dialogue between the committee and the court. But that I felt like it was best to give the information for us to chew on.
All those folks put a lot of time in it. And
We went to Danville and looked at the Shepherd's House. Kelly Kearney,
I did.
Chad did, Alonzo went, and we've got, Rand has shared with me that both, the offerings that those IOPs offer, like the Shepherd's House and Isaiah House, they are also, they're professional services. We don't have to bid those out, and we can look at them independently as offerings. And then one other thing that I should have talked about, and I did not, I have talked several times with Judge Chuck Deals from Grant County, and Jailer Broyles, you just don't have room for the state SAP program.
Correct.
That's the substance abuse program.
Correct.
As a bridge, what we're trying to do, Grant County needs more people to fill their beds.
that kind of program.
That program.
Yeah.
And the Shepherd's House is going to run Grant counties. And any individual inmate that would qualify for the SAP program, we could potentially send to Grant County. They could go through the 6-month program, and then if they're sentenced, whatever it is, they could cycle back to our IOP for aftercare is what they call it. Because sometimes 6 months doesn't do it.
Right.
And the sentence doesn't meet. So that's another thing. And let me share this, that if that happens, here's the big key. The state pays the per diem and if they qualify for the SAP program. Is that right, Jailer Broyles?
Correct, yes, sir.
Our taxpayers would not be out a dime. And we could send those, they would be getting help, and it'd be giving us a bridge until we decide how we want to go with our program.
Brian Privet could help us out with drug court and getting folks in there, I'm sure.
Possibly so.
Thanks, Judge. Good afternoon, magistrates. I asked Stacy to email you all a form this morning, and essentially it's just kind of a Reader's Digest of some of SCDC's 2019 highlights. And it's something that I'd like to get you at least on an annual basis to give you kind of a little bit of a mile marker every year. And if there's anything that needs to be added to this, certainly I'm open to suggestions. But the items that I put on here included our average daily population, which was 135. Our high population for the year, that was our high point, the most inmates we had in at any given time throughout the year. This happened to be in September. We had 162. And I've got to tell you, we do house outside the county. We contract with a few other county jails, but unlike a prison population, I've said this before, the jail population just ebbs and flows on a daily basis. We don't control who comes into our facility, and we don't control who leaves our facility, whereas the prison system does. So we have to take whatever's brought to us, and then when they serve their time or the judge releases them, then they get out. And so our population is constantly ebbing and flowing on a daily basis. So it's hard to trying to be fiduciarily responsible. I could send 50 out one day. On this day, we had 162. I could send 50 inmates to another facility, but the next day we could be down to 130 or 140. So we try to break it in the middle. Usually at any given time, we house 5 to 15 inmates out at another facility. The average bookings per day, they were almost 8. And the mental health triages, those are triages that we have an outside entity, CompCare, do for us whenever somebody comes in and we think they're at risk. So some of the criteria could be a suicidal subject, a high-profile individual in Scott County that has been arrested, because we know that's going to impact them differently than just an individual off the street, and have different stresses associated with it. So those are the triages. And the critical ones that we do, which are under constant watch by us, those went up, but also the high watches, and that's where we check on them more frequently than regular inmates. Those went up as well. You all approved us to increase our full-time staff last year, so we went up to 30 full-time positions. Our reimbursement from the state, which is what we get from the state for housing state inmates, went up almost $100,000. And then we've got an estimate on here as to approximately what our inmate work detail that goes out in the community and does work, what it saves the county. And not just county government, but City of Stamping Ground, City of Sadieville, and Georgetown City. So anyway, I'm going to try to get this to you. The plan from here forward is to get you this in the first couple of months in the year so that you can kind of have a snapshot of what's going on down at the jail.
You know, that $543,905 for reimbursement, you know, we've talked about this. Any inmate that that's from Scott County that commits a state offense, that's a state inmate.
Well,
once they're sentenced.
Correct. Yeah, once they're convicted. So
yes.
Once they plead,
once they're convicted and sentenced. I should have added that caveat. But of that 543,000, is there any way you could share with us, you know, how many of those are anything outside of, you know, offending in Scott County? You know what I'm saying? We've talked about the misconception that we have a lot of state inmates from other counties that are in our facility, but the vast majority of these, what you've shared with me, are they've offended in Scott County, they've been convicted in Scott County, they are state inmates. There's just no place to put them.
Absolutely. So essentially, these are individuals that have committed state offenses, felonies in Scott County. They are a county inmate until the day that they are found guilty of the charges, and if they're found guilty of a felony, that's when they're reclassified as a state inmate. So most of ours, almost all of ours that we have, are from Scott County. Occasionally, we will try to trade a state inmate somewhere else, but I'd say 95% of ours, 98% of ours, are individuals that committed their crimes here in Scott County and were county inmates until the point where they pled guilty to the felony charge and became a state inmate. We do not, under any circumstances, go and ask the state to send us state inmates. And I did share with the committee, if you look at the percentage of our population down here and you compare it to other jails across the state, the percentage of our population that is the state inmate population, it is dramatically lower than just about any other jail in the state. And I'll use Bourbon County as an example, just because I happen to remember Bourbon County right next door to us. The percentage of their population that was state inmates from January of last year through June was 57 to 60-some percent. Ours during the same time period was 29, 30 to maybe 35%. So we work to try to get the state inmates, although I'd like to keep them here, I'd like to keep them connected to their community and their families. We work to try to get state inmates out of our facility because of overcrowding.
Just while we're talking about this, for the individuals that would qualify for the state substance abuse program that could be offered at Grant County,
Mhm.
does your staff do a screening to qualify? If who would
For SAP?
for SAP?
Yeah, we could.
You know,
Yes,
so
yeah, we absolutely could do that. We just don't do it because we don't
you
have
don't
a
have it.
program.
But if my question is, how do we move forward formally with Grant County? You know, what type of agreement do we have to have? And then could your staff screen individuals and then say, you know, this individual would qualify for the SAP program, and then we could reach out to Grant County, do you have a bed for them?
Right.
And I think part of that is something we need to look at.
So because we don't have it, I'm not overly familiar with the process. We can definitely do the screening process. I do know, and I don't know what kind of arrangement you're talking about working out with Grant County. I do know that the state, usually when they have a bed open at a facility, wherever it is, then they have like a list of inmates who qualify for the SAP program. And I don't know if this SAP program you're talking about in Grant County is the exact same thing, but they've got a list, and they'll call us up and say, hey, John Doe, inmate number such and such, we've got a bed for him, and
Y'all take it.
we're going to come get him. Yeah, they come get them.
They come get them.
Just talking when we had the discussion with Judge Dills, you know, I thought, wasn't the number like 20, I think, was the number?
That number's actually gone up.
Yeah, it's
'Cause
more like 40.
Yeah, they have been, like, they've got what they've started with, and then they've given them even more beds, like than what we talked about there with Jared Thomas and Shepherd's House.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna be operating it in the Grant County Jail, and I think it's like up to 100 now or something like that.
Oh, it is. Just as for the other guys on the court and for the folks, Grant County and their facility, this SAP program is going to be strictly, if the inmate's there for that, that's all they're going to be around, is those inmates. They won't be in the general population in that facility. So, yeah, and they have opened it up. They've given, the state's working with them and giving them more beds or allowing them to do more, so.
And if I may say, Mr. Hosteller, that's exactly why we cannot have the state-sanctioned SAP program at our
Don't
facility.
have the room.
We do not have a area where we can segregate. It's a minimum of 20 inmates. It's the minimum that they will approve for a SAP program in a facility. We don't have a cell down here that's qualified to have 20 inmates, let alone an available cell to put them and segregate a program like that away from all the other inmates. We just don't have that space.
So what I would like to bring back to the court on Friday is, you know, after Monday, I have the State of the County. After Monday afternoon, I'll try to start reaching out and seeing what we'd have to formally do to have it has to have a formal agreement.
Yeah, we have to have agreement, and we would probably include something like we could send up to X amount of people, whatever that number is.
Yeah. And some of it's having someone navigate with the state on the SAP program part of it, so.
Does the judge have to assign them to this program, or is it up to the jailers?
Darren, what, you know, like, if you all screen them for the, you know, you're gonna have an individual that's incarcerated with you.
Right.
If you screened them, would we have to go back to the judge to have them, I guess, an agreement entered into that they're gonna enter the SAP program?
Now, the judge can pre-order that, right, Rand?
I would think so.
When a bed
Are we
becomes
talking about
available.
post-conviction or both, pre and?
Well, I assume post-conviction, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think the judge would have to make that part of the sentencing, but.
But if we have this agreement in place and the judge knows that it potentially could be an option, then it could be pre-conviction, right? Is that how you would term it?
Well, it certainly can be a matter that's discussed, and there's kind of a meeting of the minds.
pre-sentencing, yeah.
Pre-sentencing, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get more information. With that said, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Any questions?
But just to, I appreciate the report you provided, and I like it. Could you add to it the number of state inmates average that you have?
Yes.
Without too much trouble? And if it was not too much trouble, how long an inmate stays a county inmate before he becomes, I don't know if that's, it may be too much trouble to pull that information.
I can see, we may not be able to pull that kind of information, Mr. Lane.
How long our inmates are ours before they become state, and how long?
Absolutely.
If possible.
Yep.
Judge Broyles, can you just give us a quick overview of the inmate that was on work detail, who has obviously escaped, and kind of, what was going on, and then possibly what you can do forward to prevent that from happening in the future?
Sure. If I can just give a quick background, the program that we use is a program that's used statewide. It's a program that more and more jails are using every year. It is a program that partners with the Department of Corrections, where the Department of Corrections qualifies a state inmate to go outside of the facility that they're being housed in to perform work in the community. Now, these inmates need to be supervised, and quite honestly, the Department of Corrections says it's okay, and they qualify civilian supervisors to supervise these individuals while they're out. That is not something I'm for a variety of reasons. We send our staff out every day with each crew that goes out. These crews, they perform a variety of work for charitable groups here in the county, for all 3 cities in the county. For the county, last year, you'll see on the bullet sheet, the annual report that I handed out saved probably about $96,000 to those different varieties. Picked up 9,000 bags of trash, hundreds of tires.
9,000.
Yeah, hundreds of tires off the waterways and the roadways. So I personally feel like it's a very positive program. It's positive for the inmates. It's a great opportunity for the inmates in more ways than one, obviously. But it's a great opportunity for the inmates to develop some kind of appreciation for work, some kind of work ethic, to where I hope that when they get out, they say, you know what, that work thing wasn't too bad. I'm going to try that instead of X, Y, and Z that got me in trouble. It's obviously good for the county as well. And so, and I hope that they can develop maybe some work skills to help them get a job when they get out in this program. All that being said, with reward comes some risk. And there's risk anytime any of these individuals are taken outside of the facility. This particular individual, he was incarcerated on trafficking charges. He was with a crew of inmates under our supervision at the Housing Authority over in Scroggins Park. And unbeknownst to me, and I'm going to try, one of the things that I am going to try to do is work with the Department of Corrections to have better communication. There was a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit of a communication ball dropping with this inmate. This inmate went in front of the parole board. We took him, but we didn't know what happened. But he ended up getting an 18-month flop, which means he was hoping to get out. He didn't. He got told to come back and see us in 18 months. Well, that's probably good information for us to have. We did not have that information. That happened. He got found that out a few days ago. And without getting into the particulars of the investigation, he did arrange for somebody to come over there and pick him up and get out of here. So
Was he a Scott County? I mean,
he was not. He was from northern Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah, he was from northern Kentucky. And so it's my belief that's probably where he ended up back to. But moving forward, I think I've reached out to the Department of Corrections and see how we can fix this in the future. If one of our state inmates goes in front of the parole board and finds out sorry, you're gonna have to serve another year, another 18 months before you come back and see us. That is something that I absolutely need to know, or that we need to know and be aware of. In addition to that, I've reviewed our protocols the last couple of days, and I think there are some areas that we can tweak them to try to prevent this from happening in the future. But I gotta tell you, anything short of a chain gang where they're all chained together, it's not gonna be 100% at any time.
So the ankle monitors,
Oh, so that was another thing, yeah, ankle monitors, I am considering ankle monitors for these individuals. And so we could put them on the ankle monitor when they go out in the morning. When they come back in, we take the ankle monitor off. Now, that is a cost to the jail, but it would not be a cost to county taxpayers because, we operate out of these two different funds down there. I've got the county budget that you all approved, but I've also got the canteen, the profits of the canteen fund. And the profits of that canteen fund go for security of the facility or the betterment somehow of the inmates. This would be bettering a program that they're involved in, so could be paid out of that. So I am looking into that to see if that's cost effective to possibly have that as an option. And I would certainly appreciate that additional layer of protection for the program. I think it would be a positive thing.
Wouldn't they just be able to cut it off though?
They would be able to cut, you can cut those things off, or you know what, Mr. Ellison, they've also got a keyhole. And while they may not have the specific special key that goes in there, you can finagle something in there and sometimes pop them loose. So they're not 100%, but it would be another layer of protection to try to.
Might buy you a few minutes maybe, I guess.
That's right. Might buy a few minutes, might be a deterrent. Maybe somebody that's thinking about says, I've got this on, maybe I won't try it. But that is another consideration, something I'm thinking about. I appreciate you asking about it.
You all picked up hundreds of tires?
Yeah, hundreds. Do you know where some others are?
Reservoir, didn't you?
You know where they
are getting.
You know where they ended up.
Yeah, Sheriff, take him out of here.
Anyone else on the
I've
court?
cracked the case, Tony.
Anyone else on the
Thank you.
court? Anything?
I'm sorry, I was late. I don't, you take comments now? May I have a word?
Steve, if I could anticipate what you're going to speak to, I think you've spoken to everybody about it. You've spoken to me about it, and I might be trying to be a mind reader, and if I am, please excuse me, but your concern is about the cupola, and I have shared with you repeatedly and respectfully that we have to take the advice and guidance of a professional structural engineer and architect on the design, professional engineer, a licensed engineer, a structural engineer and an architect on that. So,
Judge Covenant, I talked to him on the phone. I talked to the people in Nicholasville. The guy was half of Woodrum is his name. He was half asleep. I said, do you know anything about this cupola at the Scott County Courthouse? He said, yeah, it's rotten.
well,
And I tried to tell him, I looked at it for an hour a week ago Saturday. It's not rotten. And what I'll say, to be brief, there is a man right now here in Scott County Carpenter named Paul Bradford who's building a church steeple. And he ought to know as much or more about that cupola and how to reuse it than somebody in Nicholasville who doesn't care what happens in Georgetown. He'll never see it. I care because I see it every day.
Well.
And the same architect, Murphy, who wants to put this aluminum replacement, told me, he told you, he was here one day, said he wants to put LED lights behind the clock. I know a man who installs LED lights. I said, man, you're in the wrong business. They hurt people's eyes. He said, I know, they hurt my eyes.
well,
And
Steve,
Murphy said he would redesign to
Well,
exclude the
and I've spoken with,
I think this is a workshop, and we don't,
yeah. So,
I
we-
talked with Woodrum said, we're gonna go with LED, we're going with the aluminum.
Yeah.
I'm here to ask you, call Paul Bradford, a church steeple builder who uses wood, and ask him if he can make that wooden cupola
Steve,
work.
I'll be happy to talk with you next week about this, but we've executed a contract, we've taken bids, and this ship has moved on. And
Well, you're gonna waste a lot of money.
No, we'll have to agree to disagree respectfully. And I've treated you with respect every time we have interactions, and I'd hope you'd treat me with respect. We've followed all state regulations. We've bid it out. We've taken the advice of it, and we've moved forward.
Yeah, well, you say you follow
All right.
regulations.
At this time, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you.